Let's talk about that. So this assessment is done using the quote unquote DoD Assessment Methodology, correct? What
Yes.
is that? What is that?
So it's a methodology that's been developed by DCMA, it's what, Contract Management Agency. And
Mhm.
they've got the audit teams that they've stood up, and they started doing over the last year 171 audits, and they were charged to come up with a scoring methodology to help uh, manage risks and to score it appropriately, at least from a DoD perspective. And some of the common problems that they found with some of the control areas is where they did penalties of different sorts if you were partially implemented in a control or not. So if you have a perfect score, you with 171, there's 110 controls, you would score 110. But with the way they've done the weightings, you can actually get penalized for not having a control by greater than a 1 point score. It could be 5 points, for instance. So you could
Mhm.
actually potentially go negative
I
for
was I was going to
power.
ask you that. That's the
Yeah,
way I
sure.
interpret it. Yeah, there's 1 point, 3 point, and 5 point.
Yeah.
So if you think about it logically, you could end up with like a minus 220 or something like that, perhaps. Which I guarantee you're going to be one of those 200. You submit a minus 220, I think they're knocking on your door.
They're probably not going to be awarding you any new contracts. That's for sure.
um, so so yeah, so folks that are interested can do a search on DoD assessment methodology, right? That'll get them to that particular document, which defines the process and the scoring and things of that nature. And then the the methodology calls another document, NIST SP 800 171-A. Want to touch on that?
Sure. That's really the assessment guidance that NIST has published. So what assessors should be looking at when they go do an audit to say, have you met these controls or not? And it includes like for testing a control objective, it might be asking for particular types of evidence or testing the control and things of that nature. It's probably, along with the DoD assessment scoring methodology, kind of the authoritative guidance that's out there from a government perspective on how to do those assessments and what they would be looking for when they do those.
Okay. So somebody who's listening that says, "Oh crap, this applies to me," probably. First thing is they download a copy of this DoD assessment methodology, read through it. It's probably about, if I remember right, like a 12-page document, and really most of it is about the scoring and just setting some of the rules and guidelines, and refers to 171. They download a copy of 171A, and they would actually try to conduct an audit against themselves using 171A and the criteria, on a control by control basis. Correct?
In theory, now that assumes that you are skilled in the art of reading NIST special pubs and,
Well,
and what it
everybody is.
means to be an auditor.
Well, I will say this is that I think 171A, right, is they did as good a job as they can, and I would encourage. I don't know if you're familiar with NIST HB, which is weird, because everything's usually SP. HB 162 or 162B, but it's 162 is the handbook
Yep.
that's associated with 800 171. I think that's another good document that you can use to augment the 171A if you've got any questions, because that also gives you an idea of like what you should be looking for when you're implementing the controls. I think you could use it in the same way from an assessment perspective.
Yep.
So I think that's another great document to augment 171A, and then they'll be responsible for scoring per the assessment methodology. So they're either going to give themselves a zero deduction for that. Basically, I guess it works on a deduction basis, right? You look at every control, you start at zero because you have, if you achieve the control, if you achieve the control, you get a point. If you don't achieve the control, you get -1, -3, or -5.
Right.
Okay. And then you move to the next control and you submit that. And do you know how does it work with? I'm assuming that anywhere where you don't achieve the control, that you'll probably have to submit a poem associated with that.
Well, my understanding with the submittal of the summary score, you've got to submit the date of the final poem that gets implemented that clears out. So when you would be fully 100% compliant with all 110 controls. So you
Okay.
might have 5 poems, but you go with the date of the latest one.
Oh, you're only going to submit that. You're only going to submit one.
That's my understanding. So
Okay.
you're not saying what the poems are, but you're just giving that completion date.
Okay. Cool. And just for the record, this is October 14th that we are recording this. I think it's November 30th of 2020 this will go into effect. And we're in a, what do you refer to, comments period? So anything we're saying, right, is subject to comments, interpretations, clarifications that I'm sure are going to happen, between now and then.
Yes, and the interesting thing with the interim rule, because this is published as an interim rule and those comments are allowed, but it goes into effect while the comments are being submitted. So the changes might not occur for, 2, 3, 4 months if there are changes based on those comments for when this becomes a final rule. So it could stay as is, or it could be modified by the time it becomes a final rule, but it's effective November 30th as written.
Okay, cool. So either way, what we have is going to go into effect, and then they may or may not change it. And they may or may not change it on November 30th or December 15th or, January 23rd.
Whenever they decide to, you got it.
Okay.